Now just 4 weeks away from the first Republican presidential debate, and party leaders are appearing to get a little bit nervous about just who's going to be on that stage. The head of the RNC calling Donald Trump last night, according to one source familiar with that phone conversation. That source saying Reince Priebus asked the presidential candidate to pull back some of his rhetoric. But new this morning, Trump is the one pushing back on that report, just tweeting this. He tweeted that Priebus said that he'd hit a, quote, nerve, and that he was doing well, and hung up about after 10 minutes, not an hour-long conversation. In an interview Wednesday with NBC News, Trump didn't back away from controversial comments he's made regarding Mexicans and undocumented immigrants. And Jeb Bush, whose wife is from Mexico, responded to Trump on Wednesday.
First thing we have to do, I don't want to sound like... You can love the Mexican culture, you can love your Mexican-American wife, and also believe that we need to control the border. This is a bizarre kind of idea that somehow you can have an affection for people in a different country and not think the rule of law should apply. This is ludicrous.
Let's bring right in Ed O'Keefe at the Washington Post and Jackie Kucinich of the Daily Beast. Let's jump right into this, starting with you, Ed. You were in New Hampshire with Jeb Bush, and this is what we're curious about. Have you seen him kind of attacked by Donald Trump and saying that, you know, Jeb Bush can't take us to the promised land, or if he's actually taking issue with Trump, especially when it comes to immigration reform?
He isn't engaging him personally. I think what he's done here a few times now is pick apart specific statements or specific proposals that he's making, and in this case it was immigration. He was asked a question and a guy sort of referenced the Trump commentary about Bush and about his wife, and Bush sort of, you know, didn't directly address Trump's issue, took up the immigration issue instead, and crafted that interesting argument that, look, you know, I can be married to a Mexican and still believe that border security is important. He gave his very detailed answer and he moved on. He made the point, as other Republicans have begun to do in the last few days, that look, if you want the Republican Party to win, if you want a Republican back in the White House, you've got to find somebody who is delivering a message that is not as incendiary as Trump's, and that will continue, I think, to be Bush's main line, which is, look, I'm a Republican, I'm a conservative, but I'm going to talk about these things in a more welcoming way.
Well, it's really not surprising that when it comes to Trump, nothing is without controversy, you know, whether it's immigration, whether it's this conversation with Reince Priebus, whether it was an hour or 10 minutes. And then you have his colleagues who feel the need to denounce that here. And if that's the case, and there's all of this controversy, why is he doing so well in the polls? He's running second nationally, second in New Hampshire.
You know, I think that people like, there is a part of the Republican base that really likes the tough talk, really likes the fact that Trump isn't a politician, and the fact he just says what he thinks. But the dangerous thing for the Republican Party with Trump is he's not controllable. He doesn't have any loyalty to them. He doesn't need their money. He doesn't need their support. You know, I think there is a overarching thought that he's going to implode at some point. I think you have some Republicans keeping their fingers crossed. But at this point in time, there is a lot. People know who Trump is, and they like what he's saying.
Well, you know, and then there's a concern of just sucking all the oxygen out. Maybe some of these other contenders need those oxygen masks for them to continue on, especially as we approach debate time. We also heard from Lindsey Graham on Wednesday. Let's play a little bit of what he said.
My party is in a hole with Hispanics. The first rule of politics when you're in a hole is stop digging. Somebody needs to take the shovel out of Donald Trump's hands.
All right, so I guess you can say Reince Priebus is trying to do that by saying to tone it down. Is anybody going to be able to take that shovel away from his hands? Or, I mean, that grip is tight.
It is pretty tight. I don't think necessarily that will happen. I think Jackie's right. It will have to be some kind of self-inflicted wound or some kind of implosion internally that causes him to finally get out. But you're going to continue to see guys like Lindsey Graham, Chris Christie, Bobby Jindal, Rick Perry, who are at the bottom of those top 10 in the polling, continue to pick away at Trump. They want to get some attention. They want to see if their poll numbers perhaps can get them into that top 10 ahead of that Fox debate in early next month. It also potentially sort of allows the pile-on to continue and perhaps remind the wider electorate that Trump is one guy, but the rest of us Republicans feel a little differently about this stuff. Graham is one of the few in this race still, of course, remember, that advocates for a pathway to citizenship for immigrants. He was part of the bipartisan Senate deal and stands by that. Bush and others have changed their positions to sort of more reflect the general beliefs of Republicans.
Yeah, those fellow contenders, I'm sure, waiting for that implosion as well, hoping that'll happen any day now. Ed O'Keefe of the Washington Post and Jackie Kucinich of the Daily Beast. As always, thanks for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.